all, I'm Jamie Lynn Sigler, a mom, actor, and advocate. I know how overwhelming it can be trying to decide which treatment is right for you. I've been there. But you should know you're not alone. You can do this. Start with some research, talk to the community, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. You might find results that speak for themselves. That's how I landed on Kesimpta. Ask your doctor if Kesimpta, ofatumumab, could be right for you. You can check out the details at kesimpta.com.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
And splashdown, Crew 9 back on Earth.
And SpaceX Freedom, splashdown. Good main release.
Copy, splashdown. We see main chutes cut. Nick, Alex, Butch, Sunny, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
The reason we're working with U.S. industry is to exploit the entrepreneurship and the technical innovation of these U.S. companies working with American industry to accomplish public goals. Now, what we've asked industry to do, that is, land and operate on the moon's surface, is not easy. In CLPS, American companies are using their own engineering, their own technical ability, instead of adhering to normal, formal NASA practices, flying their own missions to the lunar surface.
Can you believe this? 128 new moons have been announced around Saturn. 128 all announced in one day. It is astounding.
Oh boy, what a day it is. What a day it is to be an American. What a day it is to talk about space. What a day it is to have some cosmic conversations.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
Hi, this is Debbie, your Blinds.com design consultant.
Oh, wow. A real person.
Yep. I am here to help you with everything, from selecting the perfect window treatments to...
Well, I've got a complicated project.
Oh, not a problem. I can even schedule a professional measure and install. We can also send you samples, fast and free.
I just might have to do more.
Oh, okay.
So the first room we're looking at is for guests.
Shop Blinds.com now and get up to 50% off with minimum purchase. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
The Other Side of Midnight presents. From the spiral to the elliptical to the lenticular to the irregular to the quasars, galaxies. Where are we in the cosmic evolutionary picture? Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. The following conversations are cosmic conversations with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky.
After over 280 days in space, most of that at the International Space Station, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore are back on Earth. I am betting not only are they grateful, I'm betting all their friends and family are grateful. A lot to get to, and our go-to expert on all things space, who is in very, very much demand today, is Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. He is not only a veteran radio and TV broadcaster and edutainer with a great deal of expertise in astronomy and space, he's also a radio talk show host at 77 WABC in New York, whose new show debuted last weekend, and everybody is talking about it. Steve, thanks so much for joining me. As always, congratulations on the new show. It's great to talk to you.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Frank. Thank you for the kind words, and a good morning to you and the listeners as we go cosmic with Cosmic Conversations. Wouldn't miss a show, and what a day it has been, right?
That is for sure. Let's begin with the big news. Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, their mission was supposed to last 8 days, but it ended up stretching out to 9 months. What kind of physical and psychological toll does such an extended mission like this take on astronauts?
Well, actually, the simple word is extreme, I'm sure, but you have two professionals, and as all the astronauts, now some 10 people in space total between the ISS and the Chinese Tiangong. Obviously, these are people simply that have the right stuff. And if we look at these two individuals, we're talking about Suni Williams and Bruce Wilmore. He is obviously, both of these individuals, Frank, are Naval Academy graduates. They're test pilots. But the truth is, from the human side, you bet they miss their families, and you bet they're so happy to be home. But I think an interesting part of this, I don't think any of the NASA live television got to show this. Maybe they, of course, wanted to protect the privacy of the astronauts, because when you go up in that long duration, many, even the Russian cosmonauts, when they return on Soyuz, they have a hard time even trying to walk. So they may be out of the picture for a few days, hopefully not long. But that must be an excruciating psychological experience. I don't know if I'd be qualified to be. And being candid with you, how about yourself? I mean, wouldn't that be just amazing, just to even try to think about it?
No, I enjoy walking. I would not want to spend 280-something days in space.
Absolutely.
You know, it's funny. Williams and Wilmore said they never felt, quote-unquote, stranded. But
Right.
Surely there must have been moments of uncertainty. What kind of mindset does it take to stay calm and focused in situations like this? I know you mentioned that they're trained for exactly this
Right.
kind of thing, but training or no training, does anything prepare you for 280 days in space?
Absolutely not. And I think, again, from the humanistic side of this whole thing, and just thinking how I would respond, I mean, that's all I could be qualified to talk about. I would be in the back of my head very concerned. In other words, like, hey, folks, what's going on? Why can't we return? And no matter how much they explain it to us, there seemed to be some kind of a shifting, obviously a major delay in this. But, well, all told, it's now in the history books. But let's hope that doesn't happen again. And again, many people that I've talked to today about this particular subject, you hear a lot of different people around the country, in the media, talking a little down, if not very down, about Boeing and the Starliner. And I think we should hold our judgment on that because, that's another story into itself. So the astronauts are safe. They're back. And what's interesting, Frank, about this whole story of deployment, many people may not know this. They had the module that they arrived in was still attached to the ISS. So going back to your question or how you would think, there's the craft you came up in. So why can't we simply just go back, just to send the two of us back, and let's go back to our normal lives? Here's the real simple truth. The incompatibility of the Starliner spacesuits, they weren't ready or able to be utilized on the Crew Dragon. So I'm still miffed at this. I still don't have an answer. People are asking me, well, where did those extra spacesuits come from? That's still one of the big mysteries out there. But you're right. Imagine just looking out the window in that vast ISS, the space station, going 4.5 miles per second around the Earth, incredible speed, and saying, wait a minute, because we don't have the proper spacesuits, they won't deploy that particular unit. And there's other reasons, too, that go deep into NASA.
And we're going to cover a lot of other ground. I see people are already queuing up to ask questions about this. If people have questions, we will get to them, not only on this issue, but a number of other issues that it was a particularly busy 2 weeks when it came to space and the like. You can give us a call at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. Just going back to the technical aspect of how we got here. The Starliner's helium leaks and thruster failures delayed their return significantly. What exactly happened, and what lessons should Boeing and NASA take away from this?
Well, they need to go back to the drawing board, obviously, but you just brought up the helium thrusters. These are so critical because as they arrived at the space station back in June, obviously this is interesting last year, they did notice that this wasn't functioning the way it should. So you have a major issue going on. And what does that really mean in space terms? It means that when you're docking, this particular spacecraft may not do that or do that the way you're simply supposed to do that. But here's another interesting part about this. Many people, and I was surprised and did some deep research on this. The return and actually the arrival of that particular spacecraft is pretty much a fully automated, environment. So today, as they returned, it wasn't as if they sat there with a joystick and decided to make a left turn, a right turn, and take the right angle to head into the Earth without skipping off the atmosphere. But it's interesting. Boeing obviously needs to go back to the drawing board. Thank God they didn't send the astronauts back in September when that particular Starliner did come back. Friends of mine here in Arizona, Frank, got to see it streaking across the sky as most spacecraft at night like a meteor. But they also had some issues that really they didn't go into great detail about. So I think what's going to happen in the simplest way I can report is that it may not be over completely for Starliner, but I don't think it's one of the top 10 spacecraft that people are thinking of utilizing, at least not in the near future. Pretty much obvious.
Yeah, no, it's good to, and we will get to folks' questions momentarily. 646-720-0635. But the astronauts ultimately returned via this SpaceX capsule. What does that say about the current state of competition between Boeing and SpaceX in the private space industry? I heard you on with John Catsimatidis and Rita yesterday praising how far the private space industry has come. What about this kind of new private sector space race and where we are with that?
Well, if it was a horse race, we have SpaceX. We're really leading the pack, by many lengths. It could be maybe 50 yards or so, if you put it that way, and then it's a little bit exaggerative. But we have other companies out there. Jeff Bezos, of course, with his Blue Origin projects and his other things, the New Glenn. But really, to go back and, I think it's so easy to attack the people at Boeing. Let's put it this way. They've had all these issues in the commercial manufacturing of aircraft, but the long term for them, they've always been one of the leading industries, aerospace and space, in this country. They have a lot of other great legacies to talk about. But what I think is really interesting here is NASA is so dependent on the SpaceX project and other private commercialized, manufacturers right now. And if you were to think about this, go back about 20 years ago, the biggest issue for the American space program, which we then had, of course, the shuttle, was that in the probability when shuttles stopped flying around 2011, there was really no way to get astronauts up and back other than using Russian spacecraft. So it's really changed the whole dynamic. And hopefully it will bring lower prices to bring cargo to orbit, and then hopefully lower prices for people, even in the space tourism world.
Last question from me, and then we'll open it up to folks. You really can't ignore the political angle here because you had former President Trump claiming he directed Elon Musk to go get the astronauts. Wilmore downplayed politics. Is there often more political influence in space exploration than the public realizes?
There may be. I mean, in this particular case, just my opinion, of course, and everybody's got one. It seems as if the Biden administration did not really want to see Elon Musk do this. And the probability is that if there were some kind of a problem, they didn't want to sign on to that ticket of saying, well, we gave authorization to do this. But in the new Trump administration, obviously, that was a main focus of Elon and the president, since both of them are very close together, working on many things other than the Doge projects and the things in the government. But it's interesting. Obviously, Frank, the understatement of the century should be politics shouldn't play a big part of this. But let's go back to a very sad disaster a long time ago in 1986 when the Challenger space shuttle was launched. If you really dig into that, they knew that they shouldn't have launched that. But something in the hierarchy and the political side of that had that thing go for launch. And I think hopefully we've learned lessons about that. So obviously, we try to keep the politics out of it, but the beat goes on, I gather, in some of those.
Indeed. All right. A lot of people eager to chat with you. If folks want to jump on board with questions for Dr. Sky, you could do so at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. Let me begin with Neil on Staten Island. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Frank. Doctor, I got two questions. First, the frivolous one. These guys were stuck in space. How do they get paid? Are they salaried in the Air Force, or do they get overtime? They must have a couple $1 million by now in overtime if they got paid overtime. How does that work?
Neil, if you were on a baseball team, you just hit a home run because, in my opinion, that's probably one of the best questions. Here's the research I've done, and I'm not a know-it-all in this, but I've done this for a few weeks looking it up. According to information that government releases, the astronaut corps makes between $93,000 and change to $122,000 and change. That depends on what government GS level you're at. But an even more interesting thing is that on this particular space mission, and I maybe hope they get a little more money, one previous astronaut who wasn't stranded in space but had to stay a longer time, because of some changes down from the ground crew, this is almost comical. They get a $4 a day incidental, added bonus. And now, if you look at this, some are saying that these astronauts, the two that returned from Starliner, may see an increase in their pay by about $1,100 for their extended stay in space. And I gather the bottom line here is what, without laughing hysterically, is that no astronaut is getting rich in space. How about that, Neil?
It's terrible. I mean, when the president passes his tax thing, it'd be no tax on overtime. They'll save a lot of tax on that $4,000.
Well, what would you say? What would you think they should get paid? I mean, throw a number out there because maybe we need to start the ball rolling on this, right, Frank?
Time and a half.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. Neil, thank you. Great call and a great question. 646-720-0635. Isaac is in Brooklyn. Hi, Isaac.
Yes, how you doing, Frank? First of all, my first question is how much did Elon Musk get paid for this mission? And my second question is if it was true that the Biden administration was holding back Elon from doing it, then why didn't the astronauts say anything from space if they knew that Elon was able to do it?
Well, let me say this, Isaac, and I can't speak for the astronauts, but obviously these are government employees, and I don't think it's to their best interest to jump into the political foray of this. But the interesting thing is we were talking with Neil, I really don't know how much these astronauts do get paid up there, but I think they're just very, very sophisticated people. And I'm sorry, you're asking how much Elon get paid. I have no idea because he's under contract with the government for these particular launches. So I imagine millions of dollars are coming maybe not directly to his pocket, but to his corporation for the launching of these Crew Dragon particular craft. And, this is interesting, Isaac. We have to give a lot of credit to the engineers. Look at all the people behind Elon. I mean, he didn't just simply design these craft. They have a really amazing team, as many of these companies do, and even NASA, to develop these spacecraft that really you've got to think about every single possibility for failure. And obviously the one with the Crew Dragon seems to lead the pack right now, Isaac.
Isaac, thank you. Great question. 646-720-0635. In just a moment, we will continue with Dr. Sky as we have some cosmic conversations straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Have you ever been like a spaceship? Lost in the sky, flying high above highways, still trapped in the sky. I know the meaning of sex.
Space Ace by Peter Criss. We are talking space with Dr. Sky, Steve Cates, who, in addition to being our go-to expert on all things space and astronomy, who we tap into for an hour every 2 weeks, is not only the host of the Dr. Sky Experience podcast, but that podcast has now been expanded to a full-fledged radio show, which you could listen to midnight to 2 a.m. Eastern, Saturday mornings on WABC in New York. Steve, how did you find your maiden voyage this past weekend?
Well, Frank, being a humble person, I've done this for many years, but always getting into that chair, even though I'm on the other side of the moon, because when we're doing that from Phoenix and set up electronically, we're literally the diameter of the moon from the studio, the big star base and the big spacecraft ship of WABC. So, yeah, I was a little bit, how do I say this? You get little butterflies, but each week, Frank, I'm sure the confidence will grow, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Hey, we're all guys that love what we do, and we certainly want to reach out to the audience, and I want to thank the owners and the folks behind this whole project. Can't be happy enough. I mean, it's just a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a great show. And is it too early to ask for a preview of what you're doing this weekend?
Well, what I'm trying to do is get a couple of people who talk about asteroid impacts. And what we're going to do is a very good close friend of mine is a gentleman from the University of Arizona, Jim Scotty. And I've known him for so long. And what does Jim do? He must have a very patient wife, because when the moon is not visible, meaning he is home during full moons, they spend time atop a mountain in Arizona with a project that was called, the Spacewatch Project. And he identifies and discovers so many asteroids. And I've never been vain enough to say, hey, how about naming one after me, my dog, a friend, my light friends, all kinds of people, old girlfriends. But he'll be a person that will be joining us. And we're also looking to talk to some of the aviators, some people that I've known, Frank, and for the longest time. I've known people who've flown the SR-71, and they've been involved in that, as one of the gentlemen that we hope to have. We're not guaranteed, but we're hoping, is a colonel that served in the Air Force as the head of the 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing in the Air Force. He was responsible as a pilot for all the SR-71s, the fastest airplanes that are flown, at least we know in at least current history, and so many more surprises to come as we talk about these things. And not only those subjects, Frank, we're going to be talking about American exceptionalism. That might be a little divergent from what normal people would think, and people like myself, just about space astronomy. We're going to talk about some great stories about American exceptionalism. And we may also get into our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our Second Amendment. And I think people out there would appreciate hearing about things that make America great.
Absolutely. It sounds like it's going to be a great weekend. I'm going to try and stay awake. All right. A lot of other stuff to get to. Saturn, now the planet with the most moons. Where did all these moons come from, Steve?
Well, that's a good question, Frank, and it's amazing. I was shocked when I read this, because up till now, Jupiter, which is the god of gods in the great Roman and Greek mythologies, Jupiter or Zeus, always had the claim of being the planetary object with the most moons, and you would assume so because it's the largest planet with the biggest gravity.
Right.
But astronomers tell us, and this goes on for about, maybe they were holding this information from us, and for good reason. They wanted to be accurate. The new sophistication of these telescopes that they have, it's basically like your CCD camera that you have, let's say, on your phone, let's say, or if you have one of these DSLR type of cameras that you hold and shoot. These are giant telescopes, Frank, that have these amazing pixel image capability. So they discovered, in addition to the number of moons that was there before, which was near 146, we simply add the math of 128 to give Saturn, surprisingly, 274 known Saturnian moons. But it gets more interesting. They're not just randomly thrown out there as if they just, go around and do their own thing. Majority of these group moons, or satellites, a more appropriate name, are in different clusters. And what they actually do, many of them go in orbits around the planet Saturn in what we call retrograde or backward motion. So Saturn has enough to contend with this massive ring system. So isn't that incredible? I mean, here's a planet that's giant, but it's now got so many moons to list that hopefully if people wanted to start naming them, there's room for 274 names if they wanted to approve them.
But so to be clear, though, were the moons always there and we're just newly discovering them, or are these actually newly emergent moons?
Well, yes and no. The ones that they've identified, it could have been that beforehand, if they took these images, they weren't there. How did they come about? It might be that the great gravity of Saturn, like Jupiter and any other object, as even planets like Uranus and Neptune, you could be capturing stray objects that are floating through the solar system. But what's interesting about this, and not to get into too much detail, if you were actually to look at the ring system of Saturn, it has this amazing layered ring system. And some of those rings go one direction, some of them go the other. And there's this big gap. If people in the mind's eye just think of Saturn or go to the web and look up Saturn and its ring, you see this big gap in the ring. And it's known as Cassini's division. And that's another conundrum because it's thought that that gap in there is held together by two opposing forces, the force of Jupiter, it's the force of Saturn's gravity and the force of some of the other satellites like Titan, which is the largest moon in the solar system that has an atmosphere. So nobody really knows where these things, maybe they were there, maybe some were captured. But you know what I'm thinking? And I think you would agree, Frank? I think there's a hell of a lot more moons yet to come around Saturn and Jupiter, too.
No doubt about it. All right. The Blue Ghost lunar lander sent one last message from the moon. This is a pretty exciting thing. What was this Blue Ghost lunar lander? What did it do?
Well, this is amazing. You have to give these folks really a bunch of credit, going back to the great successes that, privatized commercial companies are doing with the moon. So they launched the spacecraft to the moon, and we find out that it landed on the surface, I believe, on the 6th, and it created, or it did successfully soft land on the moon. And if you look at the configuration of Blue Ghost, which, by the way, its name comes from a very rare type of little, butterfly, dragonfly, or whatever you want to call it, like one of those little bugs that light up in the southeastern part of the United States. But what happened is the little lander comes down, kind of reminiscent of like the Apollo lunar lander, and the geometry of that is just the opposite of the Intuitive Machines, which they sent their second very tall lander. That one, Intuitive Machines, sadly, the second time landed and tipped over. But Frank, this one, the Blue Ghost, here's what it did. It lands in an area of the moon called Mare Crisium, Sea of Crises. And I look at this through the telescope all the time. So everybody who's listening, if you were to look at the full moon, right around the 2 o'clock position, there's this roundy splotch that you'll see with the naked eye. That's the same size as the state of Arizona, about 350 miles by 375. It landed well within that area, but when it did, the first most amazing image basically it took was sunrise on the lunar surface. I don't know if you've seen that picture, but it's so amazing that we actually see the sun rising on the moon because here's the point. It runs on its own solar power, and a lunar day, Frank, on the surface of the moon is 14 Earth days. So it can only last as long as the sun is in the sky, and it did something even more amazing. I hope many people like yourself might have gotten to see last week's total lunar eclipse. One of the last things it did before it powered down on the 16th, it took an image, Frank, of what the total lunar eclipse looks like from the moon, which is a total solar eclipse if you were on the moon. And remember, the Earth in the moon sky, the lunar sky, is 4 times the diameter of the biggest full moon you've ever seen. And the reason the moon gets red, that blood moon effect, is that all the light is streaming and refracted around the Earth, and you're seeing every sunrise and sunset on the Earth at that particular time when you're looking at that eclipse. So that captured an image, which is totally amazing.
I want to come back to some other questions I have about this Blue Ghost lunar lander, but there was another lunar mission that apparently was not nearly as successful this week. That was the Athena lunar lander done by a California-based company. What happened with that? What went wrong there?
Well, that's what I mentioned. That one, for the second time, made an attempt to soft land on the moon. And we're not, saying bad things about the company. It's just that if you look at the interval designs, comparing it to Blue Ghost, Intuitive Machines is a rather tall. It's almost like you took a regular bottle of water, a little bottle that you buy in the store, like a 12-ounce bottle. it's so tall and it has a small spread of legs, so that the design itself, I'm not saying it's bad, it doesn't have the ability, in my opinion, to be as structural when it lands on the moon, because it has the tendency to tip over like the first one did. But they also sent something on that one, which is quite interesting. It's actually like the first data server from another company that's on the surface of the moon. And why would they do this? They wanted to do it because they want to be able to, in the future, it could be a repository for people to secure documents and important things, as if you had like a super vault on the surface of the moon. And we know, like Svalbard, which is way up near the pole, they have apparently this big place where the seeds of Earth, in case of a catastrophe, we would wind up having at least some seeds saved in this big tomb. So they sent a lot of data, this is interesting, a lot of records from the state of Florida that are now permanently encased up on the moon. Who knows, in the future, that might be a good place to store things. And I think it's pretty safe from any vandalism or any trespassing.
Going back to I agree with you, obviously, the Blue Ghost situation. Right. Firefly Aerospace described the mission as 100% successful, and that's what I've seen in all the media reports. What specific achievements make the mission such a standout, particularly compared to, other previous lunar missions?
Well, if you take a look at it, I mean, you have a functioning spacecraft, but it has to do its job by standing upright, and unfortunately it did not. But it did some other scientific experiments, as the list is very long, even if it's a short life on the moon, tipped over. But here's the interesting point about this. If you watch this very closely, like you and I are and the listeners, we've never seen so many missions to the planets, to the moon. And now people are looking and saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we ought to send robots instead of people. And the problematic thing here is NASA still wants to do with their Artemis project, send astronauts to the surface of the moon, and the date keeps changing. And very simply because, in my opinion, you've heard it before on this particular program, let's do it right. Let's not worry about a race. But some are still thinking that there is a space race. And guess who the other side of the coin talks about? And the other side is China. That they may actually do that with humans way before we do, because the Artemis project that NASA has is way over budget, and it probably won't happen. But an interesting bit of trivia, just for a moment, the actual commander of this particular Crew Dragon 10 is a colonel in the United States Army called Anne McClain. And of the few astronauts that are female, she might be considered very highly by many people's speculation that she could be the first female to actually land on the surface of the moon. So we have to watch Colonel McClain, because she might have a lot more in store for her in the future. Imagine that, putting people on the moon.
Yeah, very, very impressive. What I think is also important here is the symbolism and the legacy. The farewell message from Blue Ghost, describing itself as a monument to human ingenuity, has struck a chord with a lot of folks. What does that kind of messaging say about the emotional connection that we're starting to develop with these robotic explorers?
Well, it goes kudos to the engineers again. Like we were talking about things with SpaceX, we're talking about even with Boeing. I mean, there's a lot of talented people. So that if we put our minds to something, just like President Kennedy with the mission of, getting to the moon before the decade is out and bringing it, sending astronauts to the moon and bringing them safely home, I think it's just a great testimonial, as we're talking about, to the great technology that exists out there. And it's so amazing that most people, maybe 30 years ago, your opinion, of course, is important on this one. Isn't it so amazing? Many people back then would have thought that the only way to space was what NASA does, even though they've done monumental things. We have to give so much credit and thanks to the people behind the scenes, a lot of good young engineers and probably some old timers that know what mistakes not to make for the future.
Well said. All right, we're in the middle of March. St. Patrick's Day has come and gone. The Ides of March have come and gone, but there's still a lot of interesting things in the night sky to take a look at. What should people keep an eye out for, or maybe a set of binoculars out for?
Well, here's an interesting time of the year, because now we just passed that eclipse, the lunar eclipse. And just going back to that really quickly, we will not see another total lunar eclipse, and I hope the listeners, at least in some parts of the country, got to see it. September 7th of this year will be another one, but unfortunately for us, if you're not a traveler that has many frequent flyer miles, It's on the other hemisphere or on the other side of the Earth. But to answer the question right now, this is a good time if you have a pair of binoculars, as the moon wanes and fades, to start looking at these planets in the sky. Venus will move into what we call conjunction with the sun, Frank, on the 22nd. I wouldn't be, peering toward the sun. But of all the planets, Venus gets closest to the Earth. Many people think it's Mars, but it gets as close as now, some 25 million miles away. So what's going to happen? Venus is headed into the glare of the sun. It will shift position and start coming back into the morning sky. But still, to look in the night sky now, directly overhead at sunset, you'll see Jupiter. That is amazing because it's about 500 million miles away. Telescopes will reveal the basic moons of Jupiter. And just about 15 degrees to the left, if you look through the zodiac, you'll be able to see Mars, which is right in the constellation of Gemini, the twins. Mars was great a couple of months ago, but it's still there, and it's moving away from us about 10 miles per second. But you can see it and just know that that might be, like we were talking about many times on Cosmic Conversations, the next place that humans will plant their feet, and that's the planet that you can see by looking almost straight overhead on any clear night. Beautiful things in the sky.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. There are some other developments when it comes to NASA. They are apparently mapping the universe's history using a new NASA telescope called SPHERIX. This is a cone-shaped observer that is going to circle the Earth for 2 years while it scans distant galaxies. We've talked a little bit about the James Webb Space Telescope and how the images that telescope is giving us help us look into the past. What are we going to see differently or on a complementary basis from SPHERIX?
Well, this one is more of an optical telescope because remember, the James Webb is primarily an infrared imaging device. And many people may not know that, but they see these amazing pictures. But remember, its primary purpose is to detect the heat signatures of objects that are deep out into space. And it's actually peered, as we've talked, almost to the point of the creation of the universe. 13.8 billion years ago is when that whole shebang supposedly took off. We weren't here, of course. But they've peered back with James Webb about 13.5 billion years. But this particular device will give us a better understanding visually in the visual spectrum, which is so important because so many images, if people look, and I'm going to recommend a website that's government-owned, and it's really great. If you want to have some fun and you have time on your hands, this goes to people young and older, go to Astronomy Picture of the Day. And why do I recommend this? Because every day there's something new there. And many people who put screensavers on their computers, their iPads, whatever, this particular imaging telescope will get to show us something that is really fascinating. If you look at galaxies that are literally some hundreds of millions of light years away, you'll see the big spiral, like a pinwheel. And you'll notice in there's this red area around the pinwheel. And people go, well, what the heck is that? So this is active galactic nuclei, they call it, where stars are born. So telescopes like that will hopefully give us better understanding of how stars move through their life cycle. When they're born, when they grow older, when they change the fuel consumption from hydrogen to helium, like our sun depends on for the next 4 billion years. Some of them get a little bit lazy, as we talk about it from nuclear fusion. They start eating up, not themselves, but they start to use more heavier elements like carbon and nitrogen and iron. This telescope, hopefully, Frank, in simplicity, will give us a better understanding of the dynamics of these particular objects, galactic systems, and maybe once and for all try to answer what the heck is the big thing when we talk about in space. One of the strangest things that astronomers in the quantum world and regular people like ourselves, they're wondering what dark matter really is. Supposedly something that binds galaxies together. It's some force in nature. Obviously, the other weird one is dark energy. We're just children, right? Infants in the study of our universe, because we have a lot more to learn, and hopefully that instrument and others will open our minds.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to continue in a moment with Steve Kates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. If you have questions, give us a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
I told you about living in the U.S. of A. Don't you know that I'm a gangster of love? Let me tell you people that I found a new way. And I'm tired of all this talk about love. And the same old story with a new set of words about the good and the bad and the poor. And the times keep on changing, so I'm keeping on top of every bad cat who walks through my door. I'm a space cowboy, bet you weren't ready for that. I'm a space cowboy, I'm sure you know where it's at. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Space Cowboy, the Steve Miller Band. We are talking all things space with Steve Kates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. We'll try and squeeze in a few more of your calls this hour at 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. Dr. Sky is a terrific broadcaster and edutainer who focuses on space. Also, now the host of a new radio talk show on the weekends on WABC in New York, which everybody is talking about, which has gotten rave reviews thus far. And he's kind enough to join us as our regular space and astronomy contributor. Steve, before we run out of time here, all this talk of asteroids and other planetary objects being poised to collide with the Earth has made some of us a little bit nostalgic in looking back at other planetary extinctions like the dinosaurs and things like that. I think everybody knows about the dinosaurs, but were there multiple planetary extinctions on this planet?
Yeah, it's interesting. In a short amount of time, we have 5 of these extinctions. And the point of the whole story here is at the end, it's just how resilient the Earth has really been, not a reason to pollute. But here we go. 444 million years ago, the Ordovician, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, that extinction took away 86% of species because of intense glaciers and sea level rise. And then we move into time going forward, 360 million years ago, the Devonian period, in which 75% of species died from rapid growth of plants, and it forced severe global cooling. This is amazing. Then you go to the Permian extinction, 250 million years ago. Allegedly, get a load of this, 96% of species perished because of intense volcanic activity, high CO2 levels and sulfur in the air, and the nemesis of all, acid rain. And then you go to the Triassic, 200 million years ago, or thereabouts, again, to be almost precise here, 80% of species, Frank, died because of undersea volcanoes and global warming. And then we go to the Cretaceous, which is what most of us were taught this in school, 65 million years ago, an asteroid impact in the Yucatan in the Chicxulub event, it was called. Global cooling from the loss of sunlight around the planet. But the point is, look at us today. We're the pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, not a reason to pollute. But isn't that amazing that a planet that's been around that long has taken all that beating and still come out with a prize? It's amazing.
Yeah, that is for sure. We were talking a bit about the situation over at SpaceX with Elon Musk, and this is clearly a good week for them. What's going on with Starship, the Starship 8? You know, last week I was having dinner with a friend of mine who's not a fan of Elon Musk's politically, so, you know, he was looking to kind of throw some shade Elon Musk's way in the course of our conversation, and he basically said, hey, what's with your friend Elon Musk? Why do all his rocket ships keep exploding? So far, things are looking pretty good for Starship 8, right?
Well, they were, but here's the thing. People should go out and just go to YouTube and look at the flight of that particular, spacecraft. I don't know how they got the aerial shots. They must have had a drone way up there. But the point is, Super Heavy Booster 15, which is the biggest part of that 400 and some foot tall rocket, on the top is the Starship spacecraft. This was number 34. It all gets to go up into space. And people have to remember this. This is the most powerful rocket in the world. No excuse to blow up until you get it right, I guess. Hopefully nobody, perishes. But those are 33 Raptor engines, which are mixing liquid methane and liquid oxygen, and they all have to work, and apparently they did. So as the rocket goes up, it reaches a position in space, which everybody in the space world knows, called max Q. So as the rocket is thrusting, Frank, it has to actually slow down temporarily because the greater stress on the rocket would destroy it, then power up. And then as you get up to a certain altitude, they will separate the booster from the spacecraft, and the booster comes back and soft lands and is grabbed at the launch pad. But the poor little rocket, Starship 34, had engine problems, and as it gets up towards space, it obviously met a very sad ending. But they have to figure out what to do the next time on Starship 9. They're looking not only to soft land the big booster, which to me is amazing. You can see that. That's like out of this world, literally, no pun intended. And they're also going to try to launch and then successfully return the Starship in a safe, secure landing back to the launch pad also. That's amazing.
The Voyager probe, which launched back in 1977, which was providing a lot of information, a lot of data, was never supposed to last this long. It was active, and then it needed to be repaired. Apparently, it was repaired, and it's still going strong. About half a century later, where are we with the Voyager probe right now?
It's still functioning. We're talking Voyager 1. And this is the emphasis right now. If you and I were sitting at their command center for that in California, and it uses a giant antenna to communicate called Goldstone out of the Mojave Desert. So let's say this. You and I say, let's turn on something on that spacecraft. Frank, it takes almost 24 hours for the signal just to get there. So and it doesn't do this, you don't tell it literally to move left or right. But if you did, let's say we just made that part up, the spacecraft is going to respond. It takes that long. It's going out well past something in the solar system called the heliopause. What's that? That's where the solar wind that the sun generates can't reach out anymore. It's now out what we call into interstellar space, if you really think of it that way. And it's just amazing that a little craft like that, they were launched in two different directions. So Voyager 1, if you look at a website called theskylive.com, you'll get to see this gentleman in Italy who does this. He's a great friend, and these people are amazing. It's a free website, but you go there and look at the current location of where these spacecraft are. So let's say you had this magical monster telescope. It'll show you exactly where in the heavens it is, but you're not going to see it because even the largest telescope on Earth, I'm sure, would not even be able to image it, but it shows you where it is against the celestial sphere and the stars. So it's way out there in now interstellar space. And the other one is soon to go into that same mode in the opposite direction in space.
Before we run out of time, obviously we're both radio guys, so I can't avoid asking you about any story regarding radio pulses. Evidently, there are some mysterious radio pulses from the Milky Way that, according to CNN, are unlike anything we knew before. So what's the story here, Steve? This is aliens, right?
Well, maybe so, but let me say this. Really, truly, as the clock runs out here, gamma ray bursters are these intense bursts from out in the billions of light year direction. But now astronomers are saying that they're actually detecting what looks like gamma ray bursts closer in say, let's say, the core of the Milky Way, if that is its location, unless it's coming from something behind it. I doubt it. But the point is, those are the most powerful sources of energy in the entire universe. One tiny burst of, let's say, a trillionth of a second is maybe more energy, and I know this sounds like we make it up here, but we don't. We're always honest. As if the sun had all of its energy for, say, 100,000 years in one energy burst. What the heck drives that? That's a great conundrum and mystery in the world of astronomy and astrophysics.
Yeah, that is for sure. We will see where things go. All right, Steve, before we get out of here, the people can also check out the Dr. Sky Experience podcast, which is a terrific podcast. But one question I'm going to pose to you before we run out of here at our last minute. When we use the term aviation ace, what is that? What is an aviation ace?
Well, in the aviation world, it started back in World War I. And it's basically if you shoot down 5 enemy aircraft. But let's talk real quickly about that. One of the greatest that we know of was a German Luftwaffe pilot known as Erich Hartmann. And he flew this famous German aircraft called the Bf-109. He had 352 aerial victories. Other people like Eddie Rickenbacker, 26 in World War I. A good guy from World War II, an amazing story, Dick Bong, who flew his F-4U Corsair, 40 in his air-to-air shoot-downs. But a good friend of ours is General Steve Ritchie, who I know personally. He's a Vietnam ace, shot down 5 MiGs. What a hell of a guy he is. And when he did an air show out here in Scottsdale, Arizona years ago with a modified F-4 Phantom, he looked at me and he said, I'm going to do something different. And I said, what's that? He goes, you'll find out. So he came low over the deck of the air show with his afterburners going. And he shouldn't have done that. He came up over the top of the tower and he lit up, Frank, every single car alarm in that place. And the thundering power of that, hey, I guess when you're an ace, you can do cool things in the sky. So there you go.
I should say so. All right. Folks can absolutely check out the Dr. Sky Experience. Just search that podcast wherever podcasts are available. And in the words of the great Casey Kasem, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.